When I was 25 years old, I ran my first marathon. And my plan going into it was that I would find a normal pace and just hold on to that as long as possible. And when I say normal pace, essentially the pace that I was running in all of my long runs. It wasn't really fast or easy. It was sort of this in between. And every long run, I could extend it to some extent, but never to the point where I could really cover all of the mileage as the long runs got longer. So, in all of my long runs, they always ended up being a run walk at the end, a lot of walking, kind of a slog to the end. And I was just under the impression that this is just how it was going to be for me, that I wasn't necessarily cut out for these longer distances, but compel or high water, I was going to make it through the marathon distance. And so, in that first marathon, I made it through, most of the teen miles kind of hanging out at close to that pace, getting a little bit slower as time went on. Till those late teen miles, it was getting slower and slower and slower till finally around mile 20, I was forced to walk. And a lot of those last 6.2 miles were spent walking, a little bit of running, but every time I tried to run or pick it up, it would just be so uncomfortable, hurt so bad that I would go back to walking. And that's how I ended up finishing the race. Now, it's been a long time since I ran that first marathon, but I remember it very clearly. And since then, I've been able to talk to many, many runners who've had a very similar experience to mine. It's definitely wasn't just me, it's something that's super common. And luckily, I've been able to also coach a lot of runners along the way for their first marathon so that they could have the complete opposite experience that I did and have a really, really good one. My wish for you with the marathon is to complete it as strong as possible and find joy in that day of doing that challenge, because let's be real here, we're still talking about a marathon. It will still be hard, even on the best day, and that you get to that finish line thinking, I want to do that again, and I know I can do it better next time. Here's how you can make that happen. So, number one, and a lot of new marathon runners don't like to hear this, but don't focus on a time goal. So, what I want you to think about is finishing is winning. And even though there's a difference between coming across the finish line feeling completely defeated and coming across the finish line really, really strong, you should still be celebrating that finish line no matter what. The main reason that I don't want you to focus on the time goal is because this is often what sets people up for having a very difficult and challenging race. And that's because I find that as a coach, most people are choosing time goals that they are not ready for. Sometimes that's because the runner has just chosen this arbitrary number out of thin air that sounds good to them that they actually have no business running at all or going for. And other times it's because their shorter races that they've done in the past tell them with these calculators that they can do this particular marathon time. But in most cases, for someone running their first marathon, it's really, really hard to have the training under your belt to be ready for that time that the calculator is saying that you can do. And when you've never run a marathon, I'm telling you, you do not know until you know. It is not the same in any way as any of the other distances that you're running. It is not the half marathon times two. It's just different. And that's because of the time that you're out there. It's because of just the fatigue that can occur in your body. It's because of how much more training is involved in getting you prepared. And so you can't just go into it with that mindset. And so because of that, you should be focusing on finishing. That's what's going to allow you to actually pace yourself correctly and not get too wrapped up in paces early on that you shouldn't be running. So really, I just want you to focus on finishing strong, and enjoying this journey. I want you to savor this experience, this huge challenge that you've already put so much time into just to get to the starting line, that you don't want to just blow it and have this awful experience when that's not really what you signed up for. Yes, you signed up for a challenge and putting yourself through that, but you can have a challenge that is also bringing a lot of joy and empowerment and excitement in the process. And that's what I want you to have. Number two, I do not want you to be fooled into it feeling easy. Remember that 26.2 miles is a very long way, and you need to respect this distance that 99% of you are going to have never done before. If this is your first marathon, it's very unlikely that you've ever gone 26.2 miles before. So this is the longest you've ever run before. It's probably the longest by close to 10K, if not even a little bit longer, if your longest long run was even 16 or 18 miles. And so you're going to be in uncharted territory once you get into those 20s, and you don't know what your body's going to do at that point. And so you cannot be fooled early on saying, this is so easy, this feels so good, and so I'm going to pick up the pace. Do not do that, because the number one mistake that beginner marathon runners make is trying to run a pace that they are not ready for, to realize later on in the marathon that they are sorely mistaken. And once you have gotten to that point, you do not get it back, and your miles will absolutely get way, way slower than if you went slower in the first place. And this is a really hard concept for people to wrap their head around, because people want to bank time. They think if I go faster in these early miles, then I'll have more time to go slower at the end. It doesn't work that way. So for every minute you go too fast in the beginning, you're going to get at least 2 minutes slower for every mile at the end. And when we're talking a lot of miles, that is going to be not only making your overall time much, much slower, but it's also going to be making it feel pretty terrible for you at the end as well. So what's going to happen is you are going to feel like you are holding back that first half. You are probably going to feel like this is really comfortable and easy that first half. Maybe it is your easy pace that you've been practicing for your long run. In fact, I think that's a great strategy. That is okay. This is a good thing. So you want to get to the halfway point feeling really, really strong and good. You do not want to get to the halfway point thinking this already feels hard when you still have 13.1 to go. Now, when you get to that 13-mile mark, it doesn't mean that you are suddenly just picking up the pace, but you can start thinking about going just a little bit faster than you did before. And then ultimately, you shouldn't even be thinking about it as a race until you get to mile 20. You'll know what I mean when you get to mile 20. You'll understand these feelings that I'm talking about. Honestly, it's very hard to explain to someone who's never done it. You'll know when you know. And so if you get to mile 20 and you feel good enough to pick up the pace, that's amazing, because it doesn't happen a lot to newer marathon runners. Consider yourself having done an excellent job of pacing at that point. That's what you want to get to. And if you're not at that point, the reality is it's very likely that your pace will either maintain or slow just a little bit, and that's okay. And that's because your body is just getting used to that distance. It's really hard to negative split the marathon for anyone, let alone someone they're doing it the first time. What we're really trying to avoid is a major slowdown from you. We're trying to avoid walking if that wasn't part of your plan. We're trying to avoid you just having these completely dead legs that you can barely move along and you can't do any more than a shuffle to the finish line. So the plan is you're starting conservatively. You're staying in that conservative pace for a very, very long time. Feeling easy is a good thing when it comes to the marathon early on, and that's going to allow you to have a really strong finish and an incredible day out there. The third thing I need you to do is stay on top of your fueling and hydration. I'm going to assume that you have had practiced this in long runs, and so you need to have that strategy ready to go, knowing exactly what you're going to do for all 26.2 miles. You know when you're going to take those gels, and you are consistently taking them at those points. You're not forgetting whatever you need to do to make sure that you get them down at those times that you had planned. And it needs to be, you're thinking about starting it from the very beginning, because that front loading is really important when it comes to the marathon and marathon fueling. And then you're consistent throughout the rest of the time, because alongside pacing, you also have to make sure that you have taken in enough fuel and carbs. So this is the perfect time to go through and make sure that your plan is set and it aligns with what you've been doing in your long runs, that you know it's been helping you feel strong when you finish those long runs. And hydration is also huge, taking your electrolytes, taking your water, that you're sipping early and often, that you're not waiting until you feel thirsty. If you're doing that, it's too late, but you're actually starting your hydration plan before the marathon starts, and you're on top of it from the very beginning. So whether you're carrying your own water, whether you're doing a combo, or whether you're taking everything from the aid stations, you are keeping consistent, just like you're fueling all the way throughout. And if it's a warmer day, electrolytes need to have a big place in that plan as well. It can either be part of what you're drinking, or you can take something like Salt Stick, which are the pills that have quite a bit of sodium in them. And on a hot day, that's going to matter a lot more. So just remember that energy that you need comes from the fuel and the proper hydration that you're putting into your body, and is going to set you up for having a really good day out there. So the first three that I just gave you were actually what I gave to someone who just reached out to me on Instagram and said, I'm running my first marathon. I'm nervous. Please help. Do you have any tips? So those first three I gave are my main tips, but these next two are also really important because I think they're the ones that we think about less when we are going into the marathon, and maybe the ones that are talked about not as often as talking about not running for time, pacing well, and fueling and hydrating well. So this one is thinking about controlling what you can and accepting what you can't. So when I say control what you can, this means that prior to your race, you have everything planned out as closely as possible so that you're setting yourself up for success and not self-sabotaging. Self-sabotaging is a very real thing that I see as a running coach. And I don't know if this is just because then people have something to fall back on as an excuse for things not going their way. Don't do that to yourself. Do the things that you know are smart. And for a first-time marathoner, that means, wearing the same outfit that you've been wearing for your long runs. If you've been using a hydration vest in your long runs, and I get this question a lot, should I be using my hydration vest in the marathon? For your first one, I recommend doing everything in the way that you did it in your long runs in training, because again, we're focusing on the finish line and having a strong day out there and a strong race, not time. And so if that's our focus, then having everything on you that you need that helps you feel like you're ready to go, kind of like your security blanket, this is a good thing, and you know exactly how to use it. And you're not at the mercy of what's at the aid stations. You don't have to worry about stopping or when they're coming or what mile or anything like that. You have everything on you that you need. So when we're thinking about preparing to and controlling what you can, it's your mindset going into race day. Thinking those positive thoughts, you control that. You control that morning and getting up on time, giving yourself enough time to go to the bathroom, time to get to that starting line so that you feel as calm as possible when that gun goes off. But on the flip side of this is the marathon we're talking about. It's so different than the other distances in that you're going to be out there for a really long time, and it is an unpredictable race. You cannot predict every little thing that's going to happen. Just a couple weeks ago, I had an athlete who got a bloody nose in his marathon, and this is like a very rare thing for him. And he had to accept that in the moment, and he had to have the most positive thinking around that, not get upset, not get frustrated, because that would really affect his race if he did, and think about how he could manage it in the best way possible so that he could keep going forward and continue to have a good race. And he did have an amazing race because he didn't let it bother him. You have to expect that something unexpected is going to happen. And the thing that you can control is your response to that happening. And so ahead of time, if you can just think about these things that could go wrong and know that there's something that you may not even think of, and you go into it knowing that you don't have the power to control all the things in a race like this. And even something as simple as weather, that's what we get really stressed out about as runners, but we don't have any control over that. What you can control is how you manage your effort on race day, scale things even back more than you would have thought you would otherwise if it's hotter, paying attention to how you feel. That's the type of thing that I am talking about. So just know going in that you're being really mindful of all the things that you can control, making a list, whatever is going to help you feel as prepared as possible, and also being ready to have a positive as response as possible to something when it doesn't go quite your way. The last one that I want to share with you, with this being your first one, and it's really important, and I'm not here to tell you this to scare you, but it's to expect the pain. This race is hard. This distance is hard. I've run 13 of these and I've never had one marathon that I walked away from and just said that was easy. Thinking that it's going to be easy is not a realistic thought in any way. So just know the pain is coming. And so then when it does, you can think to yourself, okay, it's here. I expected this and I know how to deal with this because I also dealt with this in training and I've created a positive mindset about how I'm going to deal with this in the process. And I have a whole video about mental tricks that you can use in the marathon to get through these really tough parts. So I suggest that you watch that video. But that doesn't mean that I don't think you should be present in the marathon either. So I don't want you to spend every single mile worrying about what's coming later. Like, oh gosh, when is the pain going to come? Oh gosh, when's it going to hurt? I'm scared for what's to come. That's not a good way to be either. So I do want you to be very in the moment, very present in each mile that you're running, doing the right thing for that mile, chunking the distance. But I don't think it's wise to tell a runner that everything's going to be great, it's going to be perfect, because that wouldn't be me being honest with you about what the marathon is. And at the end of the day, we chose to do this because it's a big challenge that we know it's going to be something really uncomfortable that hardly anyone chooses to do. So just remind yourself in those moments that you are someone who's brave, you're someone who does hard things, and that you can get through this pain and you're going to be stronger on the other side. And the last thing I want to say, guys, is the marathon is truly incredible. It's one of the most rewarding things I've ever done in my whole life, which is why I keep coming back to it. And it's just a super special moment when you cross that finish line. So no matter what happens out there, I want you guys to be super proud of yourselves. And it's a learning opportunity. Not everything's going to go correctly the right way. It's not going to be perfect. And that's what happens when we're new at something. My intention with this video is to help you be as successful as possible. And again, that you cross that finish line and think, okay, so that's what it's all about. Now I know. And how do I want to go about this next time when I can really focus on a time goal for the next one? I'm so excited for you to have this marathon experience. I'm wishing you all the luck in the world out there. Please let me know how it goes, and I'll see you on the flip side.